disruptive.
America to like fuck.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. It's been a fantastic day so far. So, I want to get into some of the post-election recap, the meltdowns that are occurring, the celebratory victory for some people, and what really came out of this. Because there's a lot of, it was an interesting night, and I do apologize for the lateness of these videos. We've been having technical difficulties left, right, and center past couple of days. I wanted to do a live stream the night of the election and also post-election. We've been having trouble with live streaming and so on and so forth. So I guess we're going to have to be stuck doing this for at least the moment because I don't want this to be swept under the rug because there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to take in. It was an epic night, folks. And also just epic on the media coverage because obviously legacy media, a lot poised to hope that Kamala Harris came victorious against Donald Trump, the Donald Trump character that they cultivated for so many years. Now they're experiencing what I call Trump derangement meltdown syndrome right now, where it's just outlandish, just theatrics and just crying on cue and just absolutely crazy. We'll get into that. But first, I want to bring attention to the Canadian coverage of this because this has gone a global affair. They did coverages in the UK. They did coverage in Canada. They did Australia. So I want to take a second to show what the CBC did. And as a Canadian, seeing this coverage, seeing what the CBC did, I just felt embarrassed. I felt like the CBC dropped themselves even lower than they've already dropped before. Like, there's the amount of degradation that the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has done to themselves, and the fact that they could still claim themselves as a public broadcaster for Canadians, it should be absolutely shameful to the coverage that you're about to see here. So this guy here, Cosmin de Souza, points out that Canada's public broadcaster, CBC News, is comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler and denying the truth of the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is not a serious news organization. Defunding couldn't come soon enough. So rather than, prior to all this nonsense, prior to Donald Trump, prior to 2016, back in the day, I would say maybe a decade ago, when the CBC was actually considered somewhat a reputable source, people like Peter Mansbridge, who was the lead anchor before he retired of CBC, used to actually be doing qualified journalism, used to actually have a standard, a moral ground to not do the theatrics that you see on mainstream media in the States. And CBC used to correct a lot of the mainstream media in the States. They used to have bureaus that would actually counteract what the states were producing and provide their own coverage. They got rid of that. They have gotten rid of that. And because of that, they have degraded themselves so low that I could not believe the stuff you're about to see spewed out of these people's mouth. So you have the round table here. Let's bring this up. You have the round table there. There's Adrian Arsenal, the lead of the night's program. You have one person doing points for Republicans and Donald Trump. You have the lady in the middle there doing points for Kamala Harris and Democrats. I'm not sure who this guy on the right is. I'm not sure who that is. And then that's I think her name is Rosie Barron on the far side there. But watch where this goes.
The fraud this, fraud that, and then there was never any evidence really at all. And yet people seem still willing to take his word, theoretically, that it was, the fix was in. Like that's the part that I don't understand in a system that would seem to be working.
Well, yeah, his court challenges didn't go anywhere. The argument J.D. Vance has made subsequently is that, okay, well, it might not have been rigged at the ballot box, but they did suppress a laptop that would have changed votes. We know that. They did change voting rules all over the place.
That's not true. Let's not spread misinformation on air. That's not true.
It's absolutely true. We have public polling for it.
That's not true, which is why there's been no litigation over.
Not true. Not true. Stop spreading misinformation. It's not true. Not true. Well, we know for fact now, because the mainstream media is allowed to talk about this now that Joe Biden stepped down, that Hunter Biden laptop story that they suppressed 4 years ago prior to the election, good timing on that, was purposely done to conceal information away from the general public about the Biden family, about the corruption, about the scandals, about the criminal activity that was done abroad. How Hunter Biden, a crack addict who happened to be the vice president's son, was able to sit at an energy board in Ukraine and garner wages up to thousands and thousands upon thousands of dollars, sitting on the energy board of a foreign country. How this criminal dynasty of a political family was able to rise to fame. At the time when the election was occurring in 2020, they suppressed that content. Not only did they suppress it, but anyone that bothered to mention it was deemed a racist, a sexist. How dare you smear the Biden family? It was Russian misinformation. They came up with their own conspiracies to block this so-called conspiracy, which we now know as fact, that the Hunter Biden laptop did exist. It has incriminating information, which is why they kept it away from the public, because once the public knew about this, it could have possibly swayed away from Biden and turned towards Trump. And since they can't have the orange boogeyman in office, which they tried to do in 2020, they tried to do again in 2024, it's proven them wrong viciously. They're even to this day in 2024, they're still not letting go of the fact that it has been proven, it has been documented that the Hunter Biden laptop story was crucial into the decision process of the 2020 election. They still cannot bring to terms with that. They still want to call it misinformation. They still want to say it's crazy and kooky, even though mainstream media had to even come forward with this. They had to come forward with this. That once Biden stepped down, oh, yeah, remember that laptop we suppressed, 4 years ago? That New York Post story that we said was hokum? Yeah, I guess that was true. I guess the Biden family did have some corrupt crimes serving term as vice president. We should have maybe covered that. We should have maybe done something about that. But we weren't allowed to do that. So it's absolutely
around it, and no one's been held liable for that. There's been absolutely no.
I'm talking about a media narrative story. I'm not talking about actually rigging of an election. That's the J.D. Vance argument. I'm just giving you J.D. Vance's argument. But yeah, you're right. It does undermine, it does create long-term problems for the Republican Party to not believe in the vote, the voting system that has been set up. Some of the states have taken action. Georgia's fixed up, their system a bit. What they all need to do, and I don't know why they don't do this, is just call Jeb Bush and have him come in and do what he did to Florida, and just do that in your state.
Let's talk about exactly.
So he makes an interesting point of the fact that if you want to talk about election interference, there's many opportunities outside of Trump. Trump was not the one to cause an uproar against the institutions of the electoral process. It was done purposely. Just note the fact that Kamala Harris did not have a primary. People did not select her. To be the Democratic nominee. She was chosen. There was a system involved where Kamala Harris was favorable to the establishment, favorable to the deep state. They pushed her in as the VP for Joe Biden, even though that her and Joe Biden failed miserably in their own primaries. But we have no control over elections. We have no control over the sway of where they're going to lead directionally. It's just an absolute disgrace that people are so concerned about democracy in America, but yet democracy has already been just absolutely degraded for many years. And he brings up the example of Jeb Bush, the 2000 election, how that outcome came to be, how that process was rigged. How about the fact that people in New York City got kicked off the ballots? How about the fact they cheated Bernie Sanders twice and then smeared him and then blackmailed him to the point that he is an ass kisser for the establishment? He's an ass kisser for the Democratic Party, even though he's concerned about the millionaires and billionaires. So it didn't take Donald Trump for people to understand the electoral process in America is rigged against them. They knew this for a long while. It's the fact that the first time ever a presidential candidate that was running for office mentioned about it. And let's not forget, when Trump mentioned it the first time, he knew that was rigged. He knew that was a favorable process for the 1% and screws the rest of the population. Because he even said, I used it. I was able to get on the ticket. I was able to use the corruption to get on the ticket. Think of any other politician that would have blurred that out in the open. They would have told you, it's a system. It's democracy. People have voted me in for office. Did they? Or was there a higher power that told you, this is who's going to be running, this is your candidate, shut up, get into line, and deal with it? Because that's what the Democrats have been doing.
The question that you're asking is one that I've been catching a lot of heat for answering on air, and we've been talking about this in the last week or two. You're talking about the propaganda campaign and the playbook of Trump. This is not new. This is not surprising. This is directly out of Hitler's playbook. This is out of an autocrat playbook. This is a way to,
way out of an autocrat playbook. He's playing right into Hitler's playbook. This is the CBC, by the way. This is not Rachel Maddow. This is not Joyanne Reid, which we'll get into later, because that was just hysterical. I felt like I was watching comedy bits all night with the mainstream media coverage, is how degraded and how outlandish the claims are. Like, completely their brains just malfunctioned and just blew up on just how insane, how insidious their personal vendetta of Trump is. And now here's the CBC, which, again, you see coverage a decade ago or farther than that, and you consider them a decent source of information. Now they've gone so low to using the exact same outlandish claims, the exact same sound bites you would hear from the American side of things. Oh, it's playing right into Hitler's playbook. It's an autocrat playbook. As right now, Justin Trudeau is implementing how many censorship bills to impose on Canadians? How he used military force, the RCMP, to crack down on peaceful protesters during the Freedom Convoy. How they're doing the exact same thing on the Democratic side. How the fact that the DOD announced in documentation that they're going to use lethal force on civilians. You want to talk about autocratic society? You want to talk about dictatorship? You want to talk about totalitarian regimes? Look at what's happening right now and why people rolled the dice with a game show host in 2016 and now in 2024. Because they are desperate. They're desperate to get out of the stranglehold of the establishment that they're being abused of, that they're being oppressed by these authoritarian ghouls at the helms of these institutions. And you wonder why people are downfunded and are critical of these institutions. Oh, there's no trust in the institutions. Yeah, because they're not to be trusted. Because you completely abandoned the needs of people and screwed them over so harshly.
The things that Trump has done masterfully, frankly, is to get the entire, to get a big part of the population to believe that the game is rigged and to sow distrust in public institutions and the free press. That is a tried and true playbook that we have seen time and time before that has resulted in really disastrous things for society.
Again, it wasn't just Trump that brought that to light. People knew about this for a while. Trump was the one that maybe made it to mainstream, got it air on the media, and allowed to be a national conversation, but people already knew the mistrust of the institutions. People already know the democratic process in America is rigged against them. Maybe it's because it's not a democracy, it's an oligarchy. It's imposing as a democracy to make the illusion to think you have choice, so you don't actually do anything about it. You don't revolt, so you don't actually challenge things like the electoral process, like the ballot initiatives, like the fact that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016, and you'd think that that would be the call for criticizing the Electoral College. You'd think that would be an interesting takeaway from that. But no, she went on to blame the Trump voters. They're all deranged. Russia involved in it. They said that was the day sexism and racism and misogyny all took afloat, just like they're doing right now. And the fact this is coming from a Canadian outlet, and it's the exact same thing where you see in the UK, Australia, and it's just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling that even in different countries, even with different setups, even with different broadcast standards, they still operate in this garbage narrative. That's the most shocking thing of this. That's the thing that makes me the most disgusted about all this. Is you would think that the CBC would have at least a bit of integrity to not go down this rabbit hole, to not go through this nonsense, to actually practice somewhat of ethical journalism, non-biased journalism, which, from what I know, because I took a couple courses in college, as a journalist, you're not supposed to expose your personal biases, which I know is laughable at this point because that's all the media is. It's a non-stop soap opera at this point. It's not journalism, it's not news, it's just a non-going soap opera featuring the candidates as evil villains. And just makes themselves even more just disastrous, laughable, and uncredible. They're doing this to themselves. They're doing this to themselves. It didn't take Trump to mastermind his evil plan to do this. They're doing this to themselves because anyone watching this knows how embarrassing a statement like that will come to play. So, I also want to show there was another point in that broadcast where they brought on Chrystia Freeland. Now, obviously, Chrystia Freeland being the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada here, there's going to be questions about, the connections between the United States and Canada. Obviously, they're going to work side by side when it comes to trade and security, being neighboring countries, being the largest trading partners. You're going to want to hear what they have to think about the election in the United States. But this is where it gets interesting. This is where, again, the CBC and Chrystia Freeland just expose their utter arrogance to the situation. And Stephen Taylor points out, Chrystia Freeland wants to reassure Canadians that no matter what happens in the United States election, Canada will be just fine. Housing bubble, crime rates, immigration, inflation, national and household debt loads, and Trudeau government corruption notwithstanding. And they don't even bring attention to any of that. But Canada's going to be fine under continuation reign of Chrystia Freeland, at least till another year. We don't know what's going to happen come October 2025. That'll be our turn to make a decision of our leadership. And just the most weird, ignorant way to pose this onto Canadians and try to, this is like, it's almost like masterful propaganda 101. It's like trying to convince people, yeah, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Focus your energy and attention on the U.S. election and not focus the attention and energy on the fact that homeless encampments in 10 cities across Canada are running amok. Not focus on the crime rates that are taking effect. Not focus on the massive amount of corruptions that your government is experiencing. Focus less on inflation and the cost of groceries here in Canada and the fact that they want to increase the carbon tax. Focus less on that. Don't pay any attention to that, but focus on your anxiety about Donald Trump maybe taking office.
Well, Adrian, first of all, thank you for having me on tonight. And I have heard a lot of people talking about their anxiety on your show. And so I do just want to start by saying, I know a lot of Canadians are anxious, but I really want people to be reassured. And I want Canadians to know that no matter what Americans choose tonight, Canada will be just fine. I would even say more than fine. I think there is no...
They'll be just fine. More than fine. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to say that. It doesn't say rocket science because Trump did get into office in 2016, and those 4 years, we survived. We survived. People survived. Celebrities survived. This idea that somehow Trump's going to be the master evil mind control, well, if he was, would he not implement that his first term? Why is he waiting until 2024 to enact these horrible policies? If he really was the mastermind of Project 2025 and degrading democracy, wouldn't he already started that? Wouldn't have he already started that? Yes, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. It doesn't matter the outcome of the U.S. election. What worries Canadians and what a lot of Canadians have anxiety over, if you talk to the majority of the populace, is exactly what the guy tweeting this out is pointing out. It's the housing crisis. It's the inflation. It's the cost of living. All the things that are affecting Canadians right now that they will never bring to light in the conversation here. But they want you to distract. They want to distract their own viewer audience to say that your anxiety should be focused on the U.S. election and that everything's going to be okay. Yes, everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. But how about the fact that Canadians are suffering in their own country right now? How about the fact that a lot of the same policies that turned people away from the Democratic Party after the vote of Joe Biden is affecting a lot of people's decision right now in Canada to turn away from Justin Trudeau? They will never bring attention to that. They will never bring attention to that. But they'll get Chrystia Freeland on here to say, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. Maybe reinstall your Disney Plus accounts that you had to cancel so you can pay for food.
Country in the world better positioned to have an excellent relationship with the United States and better positioned to thrive no matter who Americans choose. So hang on to that tonight as you're watching the results, okay? It's their choice, but we are going to be great no matter what.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. Again, I felt embarrassed. I feel genuinely embarrassed as a Canadian to know that this is our media outlets at this point. Degrading this low. Just absolutely lowering the bar so low. So goddamn low for themselves. That the fact that they would just openly not only lie to people and do fear-mongering tactics like any other news outlet in America, but also just the fact that they would do just distraction like this. That's what this is. This is a whole distraction. Oh, calm down, children. Calm down, children. Everything's gonna be fine with the election. Yeah. How about cost of living? How about the fact that we're in endless wars right now in Canada? That they've stolen your tax dollars to go feed the frenzy of the Ukraine proxy war. How about that? How about national security of people pouring into the nation, and we don't have enough services just to treat Canadians right now, and we want to bring in more people? None of that ever gets addressed. None of that's ever going to get addressed. But it's fair to say that everything's going to be all right. Distract the people. Distract your audience. Wow. That's utterly just a shame. Utterly just a shame that the CBC goes this low. We know a lot of, the scandal that goes among this corporation, and the fact that it still calls itself a public broadcaster is laughable at this point. given regard to the last video that we did on the CBC where an ex-employee was ousted for actually bringing journalism ethics to the table of saying, hey, why don't we actually cover what's happening in Gaza correctly? Why are we trying to smear it in different directions to appease, the military-industrial complex? Why are we appeasing foreign nations when we could just report actual facts of what people are seeing? And she was ousted for that. She was ousted because they don't want to bring attention to the genocide. They don't want to bring attention that the fact that Palestinian mothers, children, and all people of all walks of life in the nation, and now into Lebanon, and possibly Iran, and all these different areas, which we know is going to happen, is a mass slaughter of civilians under our tax dollars. Meanwhile, you can't afford basic essentials here in Canada. And you have Chrystia Freeland, the cream of the crop of scum of Canadian Parliament, telling people everything's going to be okay. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. We're just going to do what we do, and everything's going to continue as usual. Who's that convincing? Is that convincing the working class people that are struggling to get by? Or is that affecting, the 1% Bay Street investors, the Toronto Stock Exchange, that couldn't care less who the president is? They're still going to continue business as usual. Doesn't matter to them. It just drives me wild.